Hi everybody, very welcome to Mentor and yet another video podcast. As always, I hope you're doing absolutely fantastic. So, over the weekend, a flame retardant foam system went amok inside of a British Airways hangar containing a Boeing 777ER. How come a system like this can go amok? What is the system installed for and what will happen to the aircraft? Right, so I wanted to do this video because I was actually sent these videos this morning and I thought that this looked absolutely incredible and I had some questions about it. Like, for example, how come that a foam system that is there in order to protect the aircraft and the equipment can run amok and cause more damage than it actually helps? What is the foam made of? And how can they actually clean out the hangar after something like this has happened? So I did some digging, all right? And it turns out that there are some quite strict rules when it comes to what kind of fire retardant system that you need to have inside of a modern hangar today. Hangars that are big and can take huge aircraft, they need to have a foam system for the simple reason that aircraft that are standing inside of the hangar generally has quite a lot of fuel left in the tanks. And if there were to be a fuel leak or an oil leak or someone spilled some kind of alcohol or whatever onto the floor, it is very hard for firefighters, I used to be one of those airport firefighters, to actually access into the hangar and stop it as quickly as possible. And it could, if it starts burning for a long time, then it could cause an immense amount of damage. So basically a system had to be invented that would quickly make sure that any fuel spill or any oil spill would be quickly covered and that any fire that was, raging in that fuel spill would be taken out like this. So this is where the different types of foams comes in. Generally, the requirement is that the system needs to be able to completely fill the hangar floor with foam within 30 seconds. And it can do so with basically two types of subsets of foams. But the two subsets are synthetic foams and protein-based foams. Now, synthetic foams are, like the name suggests, they are made out of synthetic materials. They are generally extremely fast in expanding, which means that if you start to run a system like that, it will very quickly build up a very thick layer of foam, so it tends to be very effective against fires. But the downside is that it's very, very unfriendly to the environment. So if this foam would escape out of the hangar and seep into the groundwater, it could contaminate a large area for a very long time. And this has happened on quite a few occasions actually, where things like the fishes couldn't be eaten for years after the foam event. The water couldn't be used from local wells and things like this. So there has been a consensus made in the industry that none of these systems with synthetic foam is to be installed in new hangars. If you have it in an old hangar, it can still be used, but we shouldn't be producing more of them. So that brings us to the protein-based foams. Now, the protein-based foams are better for the environment. Right? They're not great. They still have components to it that can be damaging, so we still have to try to contain it within the hangar if it's being used. So a protein-based foam doesn't form as fast as a synthetic foam would, but when it forms, it's a little bit more heat resistant and it's a little bit more durable. So if you have, for example, a deep layer of fuel that's burning, something like a protein-based foam would actually be more effective. But the major benefit of it is that it is biodegradable. It's something that we can take care of and release into the water system in a controlled way in most of the cases. Right. So how come that something like this can happen? That there was no fire, there was no fuel spill, but the system went off anyway. The fact is that this is not the first time that this has happened. It actually is more common than you would think, which is why there's actually lobby groups who are talking about, maybe these systems are actually causing more damage than they are helpful. I would I would argue though that if the one time that you do have a proper fuel spill and a potential fire, you would be pretty happy to have a flame retardant system like this. But it does causes a lot of damage. So when a system like this is activated and it starts rising, touching components, every single component, especially aircraft spares that are being touched by it, has to be thoroughly clean and inspected. Because the foam will form a residue, and if it dries, that residue might cause damage to these components. That goes for the aircraft that's standing inside of the hangar as well. So generally it doesn't reach very high, but if it reaches into the brake assembly, for example, it has to be thoroughly cleaned through, and the foam can also, under certain circumstances, be corrosive to things like tires and seals. So that has to be thoroughly checked. If it's gone into the engine, that is not good, because that's going to be very expensive. But I don't think that this foam layer actually reached that high. But obviously, cleaning out the hangar, cleaning out all of the other components, it's going to be very time consuming, and it's probably going to cost hundreds of thousands, if not in the low millions of dollars, to get everything back to running order. Now, reasons that these things can malfunction is like with anything. These systems have to be properly maintained, they have to be properly installed, they have to be properly tested. And if they're not, if there is some kind of malfunction in the installation, or a component has been wet or something like this, maybe there is a short circuit, then things like this can happen. So like I said, it has happened before and it will probably happen again.